Hello there, sword friends. This is going to be just a quick video about some European style swords that I happen to have in my collection. Some of the observations that I made while comparing a manufacturer whose very name seems to make butts pucker, and some of the other swords that I have in my collection. And I thought I had a bearing on the situation, but a new piece entered my collection and it's making me question a few things. Admittedly, I do not know as much about European style swords, though I do love them. I think they're awesome swords. I just haven't had as many, and I don't study martial arts that relate to them. So my interest in them, well, it's very strong. I will admit that I'm even more of a novice in that realm than I am in the typical ramblings I make about Japanese style swords. So without too much further ado, I will jump in and compare and contrast a few things. So first off, why don't I show you this? This is a Ronin Katana European style prototype sword. And the thing I just want to note, it's not necessarily about this. This is a used sword, but I'm going to make some observations about kind of general balance points. Now here I have one that's, call it about 6 inches up the blade, and a similar sword by the company I mentioned, Angel Sword. When I compare and contrast these two swords next to each other, just if I hold them up side by side in terms of length, they're similar. Not exactly the same. The blade lengths are also, there we go, you can see, close to the same length. This one has a thicker blade. It's got a fuller, this obviously does not, but believe it or not, this thinner sword here is actually about 6 ounces heavier than this one. So similar size, similar general, long, smaller bladed arming sword. I'm not exactly sure that either of them have a particular oak shot typology, or that the tip does, but in any respect, one is probably a little bit more historically accurate than the other, and I will only give you one guess as to which one that is. That's not the point, though. The point is that the Angel Sword has a point of balance that's also actually stupid sharp. It's call that about 2 inches away from the guard. It has a very light, lively blade. My hand feels very connected to the tip. It's whippy, it's not a terribly rigid blade, and I believe that you would probably want something a little bit more rigid in the context that you were using an arming sword and not a rapier, and you had a shield or something like that by your side. You'd probably want something a little bit more rigid. This has a pretty good amount of flex to it. The Ronin does not. But the question that I'd ask is, for an arming sword of a longer length here, where should the point of balance be and how should it feel? In my hand, when I try to move and cut with this Ronin sword, it feels like it has mass at the end and that it would help me move through a target, or that I could let the sword do the work when it was in motion. Now, I haven't cut with this particular Angel Sword yet, but it feels light and whippy, and in my experience, well, there are some exceptions even in my experience. Generally speaking, these lighter, more lively swords do not move through larger targets like tatami and rolled newspapers and those types of more dense targets that I cut. So there are some exceptions to that. The Hanwei Shinto, for example, that I tested, one of those moved through rolled newspapers, surprisingly so, and I didn't expect it to. So it's not necessarily a guarantee, but I would not expect this blade to do terribly well in comparison to a more stout, rigid blade if I was doing denser tatami type cutting. And the point is, I guess I would ask anyone that's watching that's affiliated or knows more about HEMA than I do, what do you want in an arming sword? If you're using a shield and you have a longer sword, what do you want in a blade? Do you want something that's lighter and has better point control, or do you want something that has a little bit more mass? And it's an honest question. I don't know the answer. The next one that I have, again, a similar Angel Sword, and I happen to have a VA Bristol. Now, this is a little different than the regular VA Bristol. If I show my monitor over here, that's got a different grip. That's the normal VA Bristol. This one has a smaller grip and a wheel pommel. It was supposedly ordered that way. Very cool feeling sword, nice looking, but here is a similar Angel Sword. Now, the Angel Sword, a little bit smaller, a little longer grip, but I think they're both making a shot at a similar blade type. The VA is probably much more historically accurate than this is. I think the handle is actually made out of a pipe. I'm not entirely sure, but it feels like it. Again, the VA has a very similar, these have very similar situations to the other. The VA is, I don't know, I'd call that maybe 4.5 or 5 inches up the blade in terms of point of balance. And the Angel sword is, sword swinging around on the desk is not good. Maybe about an inch and a half away. And when I move this around, in comparison to this VA blade, it feels really light and lively. It's again, this one's about 4 ounces heavier than this blade. And you know, you wouldn't necessarily guess it because it feels about 1 pound lighter. It feels connected to the tip. It's light, lively. It moves around. It actually cut. I did a basic bit of water bottle and newspaper cutting with this, and it actually cuts pretty well. This I haven't cut with, but it feels like, I suppose, in my mind, like it should. It has mass when it wants to move. You know, when I cut, it feels like I could kind of let the sword do the work once I have it in motion. This feels light and lively and flicky, and I mean, that's nice. It feels like I have a lot of control over the tip, but I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be. So the question I have is, what's it supposed to be? I don't really know. Now, this is an arming sword, and arming swords are different, but I also got this thing recently. This is an Albion Svante. And the thing I noticed is that the point of balance is kind of right at the end of the ricasso area there, which is, I don't know, call it about 2.5, 3 inches up the blade. Now, that's a far cry from right on the crossguard, but it's also a two-handed sword, or a 1.5-hand sword. I'm not sure exactly. Someone told me that a two-handed sword is a sword you have to use with 2 hands, and a 1.5-hand sword is a sword that you could use with 2 hands, but you don't have to. So I'm not sure what the vernacular actually is, but anyway, the point of balance is very, very close to the crossguard, and I don't know. It kind of made me think. This one also feels, you know, supposedly actually very historically accurate in comparison to the other ones that I've showed you. This is supposed to be based off a piece in a museum. And again, I feel very connected to the tip. It feels lively. It's close to 4 pounds, but it feels closer to 2.5 pounds in my hand. It feels like somebody thought about how it should feel, and the point of balance is very close to the guard. So those are just some general observations I made across a few different swords, and I wondered, what are your thoughts? What would you prefer? What's it supposed to be from a historic context, from a martial arts context? Where's the point of balance supposed to be, and why should it be there? If you can help me out, or point me to some sources that might help me understand it better, I'd appreciate it. And as always, cheers and thanks for watching.